Welcome to 23 Degrees Sideways. We're going to talk a little bit more about the lockdowns and the coronavirus and some stuff. So the reason I'm doing this on a video is because there was a tweet, and it was Adam Carolla, C-A-R-O-L-L-A. He's a blue check. He's pretty cool. Like, you know, I was answering a question about, are you people done with the lockdown? Are you still doing what they tell you to do? And there's a conversation in there. And Kitty Cat responded with some stuff that I'd really like to take to task, but I don't want to start a fight with her because I think she's in a fragile place. So you'll notice her language is very specific. Her tweet, her reply is, "My husband is a combat veteran permanently disabled by burn pit exposure. Since COVID would be fatal to him, we continue to stay home and I work from home because it is safest. If you, DGAF, don't give a frick about wearing a mask or staying home, then you don't care, you DGAF, about anyone who is high risk." Now, this is a really bad response. It's a very emotional response, and it shows a lack of reason and rationality. She's very much in an emotional fighting space. She's not actually looking at the lockdowns or COVID or anything else. So the first thing is she makes herself into a special victim group. Her husband is a combat veteran permanently disabled by burn pit exposure. For the record, I have one of the odder, weirder, and worse Gulf War syndrome expressions. Okay, it's pretty fucked up. All right, and my response is going to make that clear that I do have this, but it's not something that I use as a victim status. It is something that I occasionally use as a point when I'm discussing toxin load levels and what people's bodies can handle in terms of modern society and modern technology and modern contaminants and indoor living. But I really don't try to use this as a victim card. She plays a victim card. She plays her husband's victim card, which of course is psychologically a little different because she's being an ally, an enabler, and she's using someone else's victim status to make herself special. Psychologically, that's a really bad thing. Okay, this is not a good look for her or their relationship. But since COVID would be fatal to him, so that's actually a really good question. Would exposure to the SARS-CoV-2 virus be fatal to him? I don't know. Don't think so. Would the syndrome, COVID, be fatal to him? Well, odds are pretty good, like 98%, that the answer is no. The odds approach 100% if he has certain lifestyle measures that counteract the expression of the COVID syndrome. And this is actually a really big point because what they're doing is everything that is wrong. Stay home, stay indoors because it's safest. That is absolutely not the case. You know, and staying distant from people and staying home are different things, okay? If they hike together and they never see anyone else, that's completely safe in terms of not being exposed to other people, but it's completely different from staying in the house. Anyway, so, and then of course she makes the moral judgment. If you don't give a fuck about wearing a mask or staying home, then you don't give a fuck about anyone who is high risk. And that is absolutely and completely 100% opposite of what you should be looking at. Because she stays home, you must stay home or you don't care about people. That's wrong. Very wrong. It's completely opposite. Once again, if I care about people who are high risk, then I will say to the high risk people, you should probably do your outdoor activities in isolation and stay away from people outside of your cohort. Try to minimize your exposure to other people who are potential carriers, if that's a thing that you are worried about. But that's not the same thing as I should stay home because someone else is high risk. That's wrong and backwards. Completely wrong, completely backwards. And again, I don't want to pick on her because it's obvious that her response to this is very emotional. It's probably rooted in worry and fear, but it's also pretty much completely backwards. And I'm going to talk about that. You know, more power to her. I hope that everything works out very well and that she gets over the fear and that the health is maintained. Best wishes for the family. But her response is wrong. Now, my reply was literally, I have a permanent disability, Gulf War syndrome, and I'm immunocompromised. I've made sure to get outside more, make sure my activity and fresh air levels are higher, because if there's any risk to COVID at all, well, sitting indoors seems to kill people. And if you look at the evidence, that's one of the things that is pretty obvious. Sitting indoors and doing nothing is not good for humans in general, specifically not good for humans who do get any expression of the syndrome, COVID syndrome, which seems to accentuate, problems, illnesses that are exacerbated by the sedentary lifestyle. So, there's that. Now, I'm going to go ahead and put this on Twitter and reply, and everything will be out in the open, but I want to make sure, this is something you can't do very well on text, but, I appreciate her position, but I think that she's absolutely wrong from any sort of health, moral, or societal standpoint. And I'm not gonna respond to her, don't give a fuck about anyone who is high risk. I'm just not gonna respond to that. But I do want to talk a little bit more about the immunocompromised high risk thing. And the best thing you can do is get healthy. And when you're dealing specifically here, I'm going to talk about burn pit, Gulf War syndrome, experimental vaccines, whatever the hell is going on with the military, because it's a lot, and a lot of us get exposed to a lot of weird stuff, and no one has ever found all of it. Agent Orange, Agent Blue, Agent Pink, burn pits. Now it's burn pits. We did burn pits and we didn't even think about it. And maybe it wasn't quite as much stuff, but man, I did burn barrels every day for security purposes, and some of the shit you burn in burn barrels isn't just paper. So whatever, Then there were the oil well fires, but that's different. So yeah, Gulf War syndrome, burn pits, whatever the military exposures are, okay? And there are a lot of things. There are a lot of environmental factors. My grandfather died of cancer because of things that were used in ships in World War II, okay? Just there's stuff everywhere. I have I have asbestos exposure from being stationed in Iceland and having to route internet Ethernet cables, token ring cables, in the roof of the comptroller building. Okay, whatever. People get exposed to a lot of stuff in the military, and there are a lot of diseases. Most of those diseases seem to come down to an overabundance of toxins. And I'm using toxins as a kind of a loose term in this case because it's an overabundance of stuff that your body has to cope with. And that's what we're dealing with. Chemical solutions in your food, factory-produced food, indoor air. Indoor air is unhealthy, okay? Stuff collects indoors and it never gets cleaned out. Never gets cleaned out. If your houses were completely destroyed and rebuilt every 5 years, it might be different. But after 5 years on your couch, this is the couch you sit on for hours a day if you're a normal person and watch movies. All the dead skin, all of the critters, there are critters, all of the stuff, all of the chips, everything is in that couch. And no matter how much you vacuum it, all that stuff festers. All right? That's your air. That becomes your microclimate when you sit close to a cushion. All right? There's toxicity in your environment. And this is not escapable, okay? Modern lifestyles and technologies seem to make it worse. HVAC, filtered, the air filtration systems mean that the filters themselves become a point of contamination. it makes it, you have a higher toxin load in some situations, many situations, most situations with modern post-agricultural society than you do with pre-agricultural societies. Now, this isn't to say that things weren't worse in the Middle Ages. A Iron Age agricultural society could be much, much worse, and that's something to think about. You know, we're going through multiple cycles. It's not an all or nothing. But modern toxin levels are high, and when you do things like expose yourself to large numbers of, especially of non-natural industrial toxins, being in the military being one of those things, different people have different loads, and there's so many variables you can't predict what's going to happen. Some people develop toxicity diseases, Gulf War syndrome, burn pit exposure, Agent Orange, just all sorts of stuff. One of the things you have to look at, though, is that these are systemic issues. Autoimmune disorders, toxicity issues, a lot of the diseases come from an overabundance of toxins, and you can remove those. Mold spores, mold toxicity, food toxins, processed food toxins. You know, I can't tell you why, but I can eat sausage made at home and feel fine. But if I eat any sausage that comes from any store, no matter how healthy or organic or what the label says, I can feel the difference, okay? It's one of the weird things that got me on this path is that I noticed that if breakfast sausage was made at home, from commercial pork even, it didn't affect me the same way as if I got sausage from the store. And I started playing with different sausages, you know, not just Jimmy Dean, but everything, all the organic stuff literally made fresh before my face at the Davis Food Co-op would still hit me in a way that homemade didn't. There's something going on. Don't know what it is, but there's something going on about the industrial facility. So when you come to the burn pit and the Gulf War syndrome and all of this other stuff, regardless of the COVID concerns or whether or not it's overplayed, most of your problems actually can be alleviated to some extent by changing your lifestyle. And one of the biggest things that you need to do to change your lifestyle is get outside and move. Not exercise, just move. Moving around outside helps. Cleaning up your food supply definitely helps. Fresh, not packaged, is probably the biggest rule to go by. And you know, once you start feeling good, then you're going to notice the things that make you feel bad. And that can lead you down the road to the point where you're eating nothing but salt, pasture beef, and drinking water. And that's fine too, because you need to find your baseline, you know, and how much you can tolerate. You do become hypersensitive, but that's because you are hyper aware. You start to feel good and you miss it, and you kind of start noticing things that people don't tend to notice. People who are predominantly healthy or have non-chronic negative effects to environmental factors tend to not notice the negative effects. People often don't notice that they get moody when they eat certain things because they're not. It's not disabling. It's not chronic. It doesn't hit them hard and put them in bed for 3 days. Once you start hitting that level, or you have that much toxicity and then things do hit that level, whatever it is, then you start to notice these things. You notice when they happen, and that hyper-awareness is going to lead you down the road of becoming really, really picky on your environment and your food, which is a good thing. As long as you can do it with happiness and joy and an aspect of health. But for Big Blue Kitty over here, I just want to mention specifically that, totally aside from your reactions to COVID, which are not something I'm going to talk about further, don't get too attached to burn pit disability for your husband. Don't make that become part of his and your identity. Think about the facts surrounding all the people with all the syndromes who get into some sort of alleviation of symptoms through further outdoor activity, fresh air exposure, and relatively speaking, more natural, less processed food and environmental factors. It could help a lot. And quality of life is more important than identity as a victim. Stay sideways and check your food labels.